The following is a conversation with John Pajak. John is a certified financial coach that helps landscaping business owners make budgets and figure out their profitability. He also does site visits to help streamline green industry businesses in their day to day operations. John is the host of Profits with Pajak, a podcast where he helps owners unlock their business potential in profitability, sales, marketing, and much more. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. What's up, everybody? I'm sitting here with John Pajak. I was really excited to talk to him today. I met him at Lawn Care Life. Really larger than life guy. He's a really awesome dude. I actually, in our company, we have a lot of people that say they use his services, and so I really wanted to talk to him because they seem to really benefit from it. So, John, happy to have you on the show.
Hey, Joey. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I'm really excited to hear about how you got started with this whole Profits for Pajak thing. What's your why behind that?
Well, that started Profits with Pajak as a podcast, and now it's really starting to turn into a bigger thing. It's really turned. It's replaced like what I used to call my coaching and consulting. And in a nutshell, I am a business owner. I've had a lawn care business. I've had two. One was a failure. I limped away, licked my wounds. And then 2015, I finally said, you know what? I'm sick of the job that I'm doing right now. I've never gotten almost murdered or killed doing lawn care. So let's go back into that. And I told my wife, I said, listen, I think this is something I need to do. And I started doing what is now Turf Tamer Lawn Care in 2015. But this time around, I had a really clear plan of how I was going to do it. I was doing things differently so that I wouldn't financially fail. And then as I was doing that and things were becoming successful for me, as early as 2016, 2017, I started being very active in social media, in Facebook groups and on YouTube. And I was basically helping people that needed help with their businesses in the lawn care industry. And then after a while, before I knew it, I started becoming the hidden gem of lawn care consultants in a way. And it was really because I just didn't want to see people fail. I wanted to help them get through the fear that I knew I experienced during my first time around, and even during my second time. I used that as almost as business owners, it's a lonely path. And you could be surrounded by people, but they just don't understand what you're going through. So it started out like that. I just started to communicate with other people that were in our industry. And eventually, I'm a pretty likable guy, I guess, because I could sit down and talk with a lot of people and, we get along. And I met a lot of people in this industry. And after a while, some of them even pushed me to say, hey, you should teach this. And that's one of the things. I have the heart of a teacher. I used to be a college instructor at one point in time during that interim between the two businesses, the lawn care businesses. And, I really enjoy that. And plus my head works different. I like numbers. And
what got you into the financial side of things? You said you had your lawn care business that failed first. Were you already pretty competent at the finance side at that point? Or was it more you were kind of failing on a different end than the finance side?
What I did was I was working for somebody else, and a great person. The only thing was, at the time I was in a lot of medical debt. And I was like, you know what? I need to make more money. I'll just start doing my own business on the side, and not realizing I was a good technician. I wasn't a great technician. I was a good technician back then. But I didn't really prepare myself to become a business owner. And at that time, my financials and everything were not good. I still didn't have a good head on my shoulders when it came to how to budget properly. And that was probably the biggest thing is like during that time afterwards, I became awesome at budgeting because the first business, you're going to laugh at this. I finally decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to an accountant and he's going to fix my business. So I go and I grab stacks of these, I had like 2 manila folders full of just receipts and stuff, and I hand it over to him and he goes, okay, come, I'll give you a call when it's ready. I'm like, great. He's going to fix my business. And about 2 weeks later, he ends up giving me the call. We sit down and he slides over a couple pieces of paper. And then, of course, the mountain of stuff that I gave him. And he goes, here you go. You sign this and this. And I'm like, all right, what is this? And he goes, this is what you owe on taxes. I said, oh, okay. Sign that. And I go, all right, well, what about the other stuff? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, how do I fix my business and everything? He's like, I don't do that. I was like, wait, what do you mean?
This is hitting home hard with me because we have a lot of people that come to us with that mindset. It's like, how are you going to fix it for me? Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. It was just making me laugh.
No. That's good to hear from you, because I mean, you guys, are you guys more bookkeeper or were you more CPA or
no, I would say we're more.
Up?
So we have the client in mind. So I would say that really we come from it from a more managerial accounting standpoint. So that's where my heart is, helping you make decisions. So everything that we give you is to help you make decisions about your business. So that's really the flow behind it.
That's kind of what I was looking for, but it failed.
Right.
That was like I didn't have the right expectations for what he serviced. But the funny thing is, it's like after that, that's when it started to click with me. And I was like, at that time, I felt really alone. I was like, I went to a real accountant and they couldn't even help me. And something triggered in me. And at the time, like I said, I had a lot of medical debt and I was just scraping by, just trying to live. And I remember right before that time, though, I did find I was driving around in an 86 F-150 AM radio only. And the thing is, that was, the only entertainment I had throughout the day while I was doing lawns. And I found like 2 radio stations that came in clear. One was Radio Disney. And I don't know if at the time was, during that time period, this is the late 90s, early 2000s. You had basically like the gerbil song or the hamster song. It's like,
oh yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, I showed it to Megan for the first time last week. Believe it or not. Like, I kid you not. We watched the YouTube video and everything. That's a classic.
Like the OG internet.
Yeah, the OG one. Yeah, exactly.
So you had stuff like that, or I found I think it was like at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I would hear Dave Ramsey start talking, and I'm like, you know what? Started listening to him, and at first I was like, this sounds like what grandma would say, like just save your money, make sure it was like it for some reason I started clicking. It's like the first 15 minutes I was like, whatever, and then I'm like, wait a second, this is clicking with me now. And I remember I was so broke I couldn't even buy the book that he had. I ended up going to the library, and it was the Financial Peace Revisited book, which is a thick book,
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for, promoting Dave Ramsey's books and stuff.
No, promote whatever you want, man.
But the thing is, it's like I read that, and it's a longer book, and it's like then shortly, I don't know, a couple years later, he came out with Total Money Makeover, which is a nicer, condensed book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the book I recommend to people to just kind of read to get their personal finances back in order. But anyway, long story short, that really put me on a different path. It put me on a different mindset, and I started to fix things. But it was pretty much at that point too late for my business, because it was one of those things that I just couldn't fix. And luckily, I was able to sell the small amount of equipment that I had, and somebody wanted to buy the accounts, which pretty much leveled me out. I kind of broke even on that. I still, lost money on it, but at the time, I think God was saying, like, this is, you need to go through this pain
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
later
Hmm.
you can be better. So yeah, many, many years later, it just became, I ended up leaving the other company, the other lawn care company, and I became a college instructor for it's basically, it was like almost like a medical trade school, but I was doing like massage therapy and stuff and kinesiology and anatomy and physiology. And it's just a weird, I know this is a weird winding path, but that's kind of like, to bring you up to date, that's kind of how it happened. And I got burnt out there because they started using me I was the bookstore manager, and there's a whole bunch of things. I found a bunch of inefficiencies that they had in their branch, where I brought it to the president of that school, and I said, listen, if we do this, this, and this, we could save like over $300,000 a year just in this aspect. Well, that was all good and fine, but then they have multiple schools across the country, and
Yeah.
then they were like, they implemented that across, and he took the credit for it. He didn't give me the credit.
Mm.
So I get a little salty, and I didn't do anything wrong or anything bad,
Sure.
but didn't feel appreciated. And then I ended up going into construction. I was on a shovel, but for some reason, some people saw something in me, brought me into the office. I started doing timekeeping, and then I started doing, eventually for another company, I started doing estimates. And holy moly, I'll tell you what, that was like worth a college
Yeah.
degree in its own, because I was bidding on multi-million-dollar projects. And after a while, the people that are actually hired to be the estimators, I was the third estimator, which I was actually a contractor still, getting paid what my contractor wage was. I was winning them more bids with my approach than the other two were. And they weren't mad at me or anything, because, hey, they're staying, everybody's staying busy, and they have a job and everything. But, like, I would see things that they couldn't, like, because I would work in that field. I knew that field,
Yeah.
and I could see, hey, this is the area we're working in. We better, from my experience and historical data, we have to plan for a little extra stuff here. And not to mention, we're probably going to have a change order. So we have to kind of make them aware of it. Like, oh no, that's not necessary. We could get the bid for lower and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, trust me, the, the client's going to appreciate this.
Hmm.
And a lot of times my estimates were much higher than what the other guys would provide, and even other companies. But then after I built a reputation for myself a little bit, they were like, who did this? Pajak did it. Yeah, we're going to go with him. And it wasn't like nepotism or what's the favoritism because I'm a nice guy. Is because they knew that when they went with me, that I've calculated. It's not like I was a mind reader, but I calculated things down to the point where they knew what their budget was going to be for this project.
Yeah.
And
What do you think allows you to see things that other people don't see? Like, what do you think? Because that's kind of your hidden talent, right? Could you define it by like one word, or like what do you think it is that sets you apart, being able to see that? Because you're not just going against, you're going against other, estimators that, they're not dumb guys or anything. They're all really intelligent. So, what do you think differentiated you there?
I'm not exactly sure if I could wrap it up in one word, but God gave me this talent of, I literally could start seeing, I get some data, and I could start putting even unrelated things, putting them together.
Hmm. So you see
My
patterns.
I see patterns. I
Yeah.
see there's some of it's not intuition. I guess it is intuition. I
Based on it,
if I
well, from experience, probably. You have quite
Yeah.
the unique path, so I think that probably gives you a little bit of different experiences there to pull in, and the ability to see in patterns.
Hmm.
So interesting.
It's not something I can't really I would have a very hard time teaching somebody what I do because like the math part is easy. I could teach that to
Yeah.
anybody,
Hmm.
and that's what I do. I not only do I provide service for the people that work with me, it's also just, I try to walk them through as much as possible. So like they're, it's like one day you go, well, I don't really need you. And I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah, that's my goal as well in our company. So that's one thing I really like about you. I could just tell that from the minute I met you that since you actually gave a crap, you would help people. It's a teach a man to fish type analogy, that we
Right.
hear so often. But I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, but at the same time, it's, for me, I didn't realize I had that, talent or that gift until much later in my life. It's not like I'm like, oh, like, man, if I would have realized this earlier on in life, because my mind's always worked that way. I'm like, I could have done so much more with this.
Yeah, my brain is very similar to yours. I think that school suppresses people like us.
Mm-hmm.
It's you don't really get to see in patterns. Everything's just a fact or a how to or a manual or everything. You don't really get to start. You have to really have a lot of different. But the thing about me and you is like the more experiences we can have, like all these differing things from other people, we can start really using our talent to pattern things together. If you're only going to do one job for your whole life, that talent probably would never even get actualized. But since you've been skipping around over here, you're at the college thing, and then you're at the construction company, it's just giving you all these different things to intertwine and put into a full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that's a lot of what you're talking about is just some God given wisdom as well. I think wisdom is being able to see in patterns and things of that nature. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying my best to use this to help as many people as I can. Again, like before, uh, uh, let's just say even 7 years ago, you know, I was coaching before I was, coaching, like now I've got like a website and everything, but, the podcast itself. So, kind of come full circle, that's kind of how Profits with Pajak ended up coming.
Okay.
It's like I never had names for the stuff that I do, but like now I do. It's like all these things came to fruition before. I remember in 2017, I kind of jokingly said, I actually named my program, one of the workshops I do is called Budgets, Break Evens, and Bottom Lines,
Yeah.
and it just flowed right off the top of my head, and I was like, wait, actually, that's pretty good. Let me use that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The reason I started with, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, please go.
The I started off with how'd you get started with Profits with Paycheck? I knew you had. I talked to you briefly at Lawn Care Life. I knew you
Hmm.
had done the estimating and everything. It really piqued my interest. But I started with it because a lot of times you're only starting a podcast if you have some why behind it. So I wanted to know your why, which is kind of what we're building on. Or you're just trying to sell product, which doesn't seem like that's what you're trying to do, or you're trying to build a brand. It's one of those three things typically. And it seemed like to you yours was going to be very philosophical and a why behind it, and that's kind of what you've been answering to. But I knew you had budgets, break evens, and bottoms lines. I have a lot of guys actually in our company that use it. But that's why I hopped right to the podcast. Is just
Hmm.
kind of reverse engineered. I like to look at something kind of like at the top and then reverse engineer it. And anyway, that's what I was trying to pick your brain on.
Yeah, no problem. It it's kind of funny. Like, uh, I have a couple mentors. Even they're like, "Oh, you got a mentor?" Of course, I've gotten mentors. I don't think any of us, that are in this industry where we're trying to help others, we should all have mentors. But they were like, you don't promote yourself enough. Like you're out there, you're doing the podcast, but you're not like really selling it. I'm like, I know I probably could uh, be better at that, but I'm just trying to help him. And he's like, you're doing a disservice by not trying to help, get people to get on it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm giving them information, but it's, it would take them a very long time to compile a lot of the
Sure.
information that I give out. And I'm like, yeah, well, I do have a coaching program, but I just don't push it in hard enough. I'm always focused on the people I'm taking care of at the time.
Yeah.
I want to do. I'm in the opinion that what helped me was small groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have this one group in particular that really helped me I helped everybody in the group, and then they were able to help me, uh, and it wasn't like a Facebook group that had like 7,000 people in it. It was like, no, it was actually like a group of 10 people or less, and that's kind of the approach I want to do now. Is just
Yeah. So
go about it.
you're kind of just being yourself on the way you like to consume information.
Hmm.
So I watch a lot of I don't really watch a lot of the flashy influencer stuff. That's not how I've largely learned. I watch a lot of like I watch hedge fund managers give speeches for 3 hours. Like that's the sort of thing that I that I do. And so like that's kind of the way I wanted to do a lot. So, since now I'm moving more into the branding side of our business, that's kind of how I want to sell things, is just talk about things. And if it piques their interest, then so be it. If you don't want to work with us, that's fine, But at the end of the day, it's about helping people, and that's how I've been helped. So that's what I want to be a reflection of the way that I sell things on our, company as well. I don't like pushy sales or
Hmm.
flashy things or anything like that. It's just be genuine and give a crap. At the end of the day, people just want to know that you're taking care of them.
Exactly. And one thing that I'll bring up too is I've had some folks come to me, and they are, I always ask about their goals and what they're doing,
Yep.
and why they do it. And a lot of people are in pain, and I could tell, and they're like, they want to fix their business. I see myself sitting across from the accountant, but the roles are reversed.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I've had a couple people do this to me, and I start asking about their goals. So, okay, like, what do you want to do with your business? What does your ideal business look like? What do you want for yourself personally? And they're like, uh, I don't know. I just want my business to be better. Okay, better how?
Mm-hmm.
I want more money. Okay, well, where are we at now, and what's enough money? And I started asking them,
Yeah.
specifics. I just want to know what their goals are, because if I know, that's the first and
Yes.
foremost thing. I need to know where they're going. I need to know where the captain wants to go with the ship. Right? You're the business owner. You're the captain. The ship is your business.
Mm-hmm.
We're out on the high seas, right? You could go anywhere. People are like, what do you mean? I'm like, you could literally push it anywhere. You could, adjust your business to be the ideal thing. It doesn't have to look like everybody else's ship either. It could be goofy looking, but as long as it floats and it gets you to where you go, who cares? And that, when I encounter people that are like that, it's not that I get upset with them by any means, but I realize it's like they don't even have a clear vision of what their why is. They don't have a clear vision of where they want to go. They just want more, and they just want better. And it's like,
Yes.
well, we could go north.
I think
We,
it's a very Western condition. It's like your whole life in the American school system is, and I'm not knocking it or anything, but it doesn't ever give you a goal. It's just giving you information. And so when you're learning everything through school, you don't know where to put it as a child. There's a few select ones that's like, I wanted to be a doctor since birth. And so you know where to put all that information. But most of it's just like, what do we do with all this stuff? And then, over time, you just get used to people telling you what you need to think and how to think. And I listened to this, I read this biography by Steve Jobs, and he traveled abroad a lot. And he was big into Eastern thinking, and a lot of them are very intuitive, whereas Western is just constantly tell me how to do things.
Mhm.
And so I think everybody has the innate ability to do what you're talking about, but it does have to be aligned with a goal, because you don't have anywhere to put that information and how to nuance things unless you do have an overarching theme. And me and Megan work with clients like this all the time. So that's why I'm kind of smiling when you're talking about it. It's just like, what do you want? You can do the debt way. You can do the no debt way.
Mhm.
Some guys are single. Some guys have a huge family. If you have 6 kids, you're not going to be able to grow 100% year over year. I talk about that all the time. I mean, you possibly can, but at the expense of what cost? There's all these different nuances to every single situation. And through mass selling products on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, we all think that there's some formula, but it at the end of the day, your goal has to be aligned with what sort of lifestyle you want too. If you're just going for that one goal in that one system, it's not going to align with, maybe some personal values that you have. You might have to compromise, you might have to work 80 hours a week longer than you want to. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to be more of a dad. So it's just really so dependent on everybody's unique scenarios. And I love what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that you bring up so many good points because for me personally, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a father, and that's important to me. I know that these years are they're very precious. They go by very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I could now, and I'm gonna, share some secrets here. My business could have been much larger at this point if I would have done certain things like, I don't get me wrong, I still have done the 80 plus hours a week,
Sure.
but I made the decision that I was going to help focus. I wanted to know my daughter. I wanted her to know who I am and not just some ghost that comes in at night and leaves really early. It's like, well, what happens to him during the day? I don't know. He's just not here. I see him for maybe 15, 20 minutes. I decided that was not going to be my path. My father, my parents divorced when I was very young. I think I was 4. And my dad made it very clear that he wanted to be part of our lives. So, of course, the settlements and stuff they're kind of nasty in the sense where the judge divvies up time. My dad would get us on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But anyway, I'm not going to go into it too far. But like we basically had Friday evening with my dad after he got off work. He would show up like as soon, like it didn't matter how filthy he was after work. He would be there, with open arms to pick us up. And, I'd spend the day, me and my sister would spend the day with him on Saturday. And then Sunday morning, we'd have to get back home. In my opinion, it really wasn't that fair to my dad, but it's what the conditions that, it was the cards that he was dealt with. But he, that was the one thing. It was like, it didn't matter. He was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I want that for my daughter. We're not going to get divorced.
Yeah.
We're going to do everything we can to make everything work out. And luckily, my wife and I get along very good. Do we drive each other nuts? Of course we do. But nothing serious, And so anyway, I pivoted. That was part of my goals. Like, I want, people talk about the life, work balance, and it's kind of it's an odd subject to talk about because in my mind, I like literally would say, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm spending plenty of time with my kid and my wife. But there's times when it's like springtime. They know I'm like insane. It's like, it's just busy, 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 busy. I'm like, hi, I love you. I'm going to flip a switch and I'm not going to quite be here as much, but I'm still here,
Yeah.
Anyway, long way of saying that, I have very specific things that I want. I want my business to work for me, not me working for my business. Yeah. And if anyone out there that's listening is on the, you don't exactly know what you want. You just know you want more or you want better. Well, start listing, what does better look like? What does more look like? And sometimes, and I'm not trying to cap anybody, but, when is enough? Like, when is more to the point where it's like, well, hang on a second. If we do this, is this really, is this still going with the goals that I want?
Right. It's like, how do you balance contentment with growth? That was actually one of my questions I had for you, and you just naturally went into it. But that's just beautiful because I do think we have. It's almost like we have an obligation to humanity as humans that are capable of creating things and generating surplus and stuff like that. But at the same time, we have to balance that with, what obligation do I have to my family and what obligation do I have to the world? And I've just always approached it from, if I can build a solid foundation in my home, then it can extrapolate out to my community. But I've always put, my family first, and and with that mindset, it's like profit first, but you're doing it with your family. you do family first, and then whatever's left, you're still running a fabulous business and taking care of everyone. But you take your family first on top, and then you build your life around that. It's kind of, I
Yeah.
feel like, what you're saying. You
Yeah.
said you posted something in the terminal, I think at the airport, like 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was just so awesome. You were just saying something along the lines of, I'm, even though I forget what it was. Maybe you can remember, but it kind of brought a tear to my eye. I thought it was so beautifully said. It,
Yeah.
it, it was like, even though I'm gone, I'm still here, or something like that, with my family. I don't know if you remember posting that, but it,
Oh,
it was just the way you posted it. It was like a paragraph, but it was just so
hmm
beautiful.
yeah. I couldn't paraphrase it right now, but essentially, I ended up going to Dallas, and this doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter where I go. I travel quite a bit for my consulting and coaching, and just to be in the events where everybody's going. And my wife knows this. It's been like this for years. I love going to these events, but it's a double-edged sword because I hate leaving my family.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, that post that you're talking about, it's like it doesn't really matter where I go. I could if my family's with me, if my wife and my daughter are with me, I'm home. Even if I've drug them across country before,
Yeah.
going to different events, and that was home. But most of the time, I do these things to help benefit them, but it doesn't feel right. It's
Yeah.
like as soon as I
Exactly.
land, I'm like, I got to get back. You know,
Now,
I
how often does your family get to travel with you?
Not much. Um, I I would like, most of the time when I do it, um, it's like at a suicide pace because it's like a whirlwind. I usually fly in somewhere, I spend the day doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing, and then it's like I'm catching the next flight out the next day or something. So it's really not even like travel, like with Dallas. I've been to Dallas a couple times. I didn't go around and see the town or anything like that. It's just I came in, it's all business. I have uh one of my friends that is watching, like, man, you're going everywhere. And I'm like, I can tell you, I'm like, the only reason I know where I'm at is because I start recognizing the airports. I'm like, I couldn't tell you what the biggest structure in town is. I couldn't tell you like you know, what the skyline looks like, or, anything. It's like, it's like blinders on, I'm just going
Yeah,
there
interesting.
for the thing that I'm there for. When I take my family with me, that's when I start to try to explore and
Yeah.
do extra stuff. But a lot of times it just doesn't work. My wife at one point, she's like, she's come to, when it used to be called GIE. So that's been a while now. But the Equip Expo,
Yeah.
I brought them down with me one year, and she's like, you're so busy. It's like, I don't even know why we're here. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but you're here with me. And she's like, yeah, but I don't like it. Okay. So they either, I'll like have an itinerary for them. I'm like, well, there's, the zoo's here and this isn't here. And, you know, I
Out.
try to keep them occupied, but at the same time, it doesn't always pan out.
Yeah. When you're traveling, is it more for networking sake, or are you actually, doing some finance things as well?
Well, it depends on what it is. I've flown out to people's businesses before
Okay.
to do like real hands-on, like let's pull back the covers, let's see at things. I had like one client in particular, I'll never forget this story. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to ask you, Joey, what you would suggest. Okay.
Oh Lord,
Um,
I haven't done any site visits, so bear with
n-
me.
okay. Now he's got several buildings, on his property that, he runs his business out of. He does mostly maintenance, lawn care, but I went there and we started going through the numbers and everything. But then he started showing me, the lay of the land. Like, okay, this is where our main shop is, and this is where this is where the mechanics bay is. It's nothing crazy huge. It's, don't think of like super polished, think of like a dirt floor barn,
Sure.
you know? It's like I'm not trying to romanticize it. He's got a good setup, you know. But then one thing I realized that there was like a big set of it was like almost like a tarp wall, and like that was an addition, you know, to this one building. And I kind of like look back and I'm like, what's back there? Because I still visqueen blowing, you know, and I'm like, what's over there? It looks like stuff on pallets. He goes, oh yeah, 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 and he brings me in there, and there's like 11, was it 11 or 12? I can't remember now. It was like a whole fleet of right standers on pallets, still wrapped.
What?
And I
Uh,
go,
Well,
what
I
are
just think
these?
opportunity cost.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, what are these? And he goes, that's those are the replacements. I go, how long you had them? Oh, a few months now. I'm like, when are you implementing these things into the field? Like, what are they replacing? And you know, we're looking at it, and I'm like, okay, the red flag pops up on my end.
Sure.
You know, I'm like, well, when are you implementing these? When are you replacing these? When are you putting these into service? He's like, when the other ones get older or something. I'm like, okay. And it turns out, like, I don't think his accountant's a real CPA. You know, he it might have been a buddy or something. He's like, oh yeah, you know, to get a tax write-off, you got to go ahead and use Section 179 to, you know, buy this equipment. You could write it
Yeah.
all off in 1 year, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. But he financed it, all of it,
Mm,
and he's having
that's
money
wild.
cash flow issues.
That's
And
so obvious. It's like it's hard to believe you had to fly out for that. Honestly.
yeah, so it's not that I had to be, you know, Professor Sleuth over here, you know, Scooby Doo to like understand that there was a problem, but it's like those types of trips can really open your eyes on things. It took almost 2 years of us working together for him to like bounce back from that. And I am not an accountant. I am not a CPA. I'm not even, I do our
You're a
own
certified
books.
financial coach, right?
Correct. I'm a
Yeah.
certified financial coach. And that part is, you know, I'm just good with numbers, but at the same time, like, I don't know all the tax laws. I know enough
Yeah.
to
Same.
like get me around, but that's why I have a CPA. That's
Hmm.
why I have somebody that's their bread and butter. They literally sit there every year looking at all the updates and tax codes and
Yeah.
stuff
It's a
like
lot to
that.
keep up with. It's a full time job.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have time for that. I don't
Right.
want that either. I like
Yeah.
the
Me neither.
numbers. I
It's
don't
not
like
interested.
no.
not not interested in the government, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's if I could, I'd be like, well, let's not do that. Let's
Yeah.
not
Exactly.
tax people like that. That's
Yeah. The
that's
government
ridiculous.
is one big frictional cost.
Yeah, it make. Oh man, we could go down a rabbit
Yeah,
hole
let's
here.
not go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, it's just nice being around like-minded individuals, which I think
Yeah.
more people are waking up to that. But
hmm So anyway, the you know like when I travel for those types of purposes, I'm like I can't take anybody. I got to have my game face on even when I'm at the hotel because I need to figure this out in a very short amount of time. I don't have to do that, but that's just how my mind gets wired.
yeah,
This is why, you know, when I go, like this last trip in Dallas, I probably slept maybe 4 hours during that entire time I was there. Not because they kept me to do all these things, but it was just my mind wouldn't stop racing. It's like, oh, this is new. This is cool. I could fix this. You
yeah.
know, it's like, oh, I'm excited. So, um, but yeah, when
It
I
honestly
do,
sounds like a lot of fun to me. Like that's one of my goals eventually is to do site visits.
Mhm.
So this has been a goal for me for a long time, but what I wanted to do when I was younger, I'm 33 now. But I wanted like everybody always asked me my ideal vacation and I was like, probably if I just got to go around and look at manufacturing plants, like that would
Mhm.
be a lot of fun. I've done a lot of manufacturing, so I like that thing, but yeah, I mean, just looking at systems and processes and things like that, it fascinates me. People think I'm weird, but it's nice being around somebody else that thinks the same way.
Yeah, it's it for me again, like the way that my mind works, knowing that stuff. You know, if I ever get it, like I've been to a couple of the major uh, manufacturers and builders in this country for lawn and landscape equipment. I was actually at the biggest one, I would think, because their umbrella covers a lot of stuff. You don't even realize it. There's stuff that they own that
Yeah.
they won't even release anymore.
Yeah.
you know. Um, but just seeing that and like, oh, putting things together in my head, I'm like, yeah, um, I understand why our industry, like why prices are this certain way and this and that and the other.
Hmm.
And also, I'm a dork when it comes to figuring out like, all right, well, why was there a huge spike in pricing over the past couple of years? It's like supply and demand. Yeah, the amount of steel that we had, there was a steel shortage for a bit. You
Yeah.
know,
So you follow the futures market and commodities and everything.
yeah, I don't go into the markets really. I just kind of I pick up enough stuff. I'm not sitting
Yeah.
there watching tickers or anything like that.
Yeah. You just know how option contracts work and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets to the point where it's like I don't talk about that at all because that's the boring. I mean, to other people,
Yeah.
it's like
Sure.
they just stare into space and they're like, "Huh?" And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and it's a if you're not communicating thoughts well and you're just using a lot of this lingo that's over people's heads, I mean, I don't find it helpful for anybody except for making a bigger gap between the gatekeepers of finance and the blue collar workers.
"Yeah." And I find myself talking sometimes when I'm even on the podcast, I will I say things the way I would write them sometimes, and I'm like, "Yeah, that probably I probably should have said that differently." Not
Yeah,
because it just doesn't sound like a human being talking in a sense. And I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
that's just how my brain formulates stuff. So,
yeah. Me too. Yeah, like I understand why there's finance language, but it is not helpful for the vast majority of the population. It's its own language.
yeah.
Um. All right. So what's how do you learn? Are you a book reader? Are you is it audiobooks? Do you learn from documentaries? Like what's your learning style? Because you seem like a growth oriented individual.
Mhm.
And if so, what are your favorite books or whatever? Just drop a few of them, just depending on whatever your
Uh,
favorite sources of information are.
I'll tell you my first, if you really want to know, my first form of learning is, do you remember the robot from The Incredibles, that big
Yeah.
ball that,
Hmm.
it kind of like learned from experience
Yeah.
and it would just figure it out. It's like, oh, okay, that didn't work out. So let's fix it. Let's fix it. Let's fix it. Let's get better. We're going to kill more
Right. Right.
superheroes.
Right.
Um, that's like the best way I learn. I'm more of a hands-on person. Funny thing in like high school, I was actually so disenchanted with the school system in a sense that I almost rebelled by like not learning things.
Yeah.
The only thing I really wish I would have gone back and done was learn more math
Yeah.
because that would have been made my life easier. After high school through college, actually in college I blew it off too, but I didn't. Um, I just I would pick it up afterwards. I'm like, okay, it's of actual interest to me now, so I'm going to
Yes.
actually learn it. Um, but you know, just doing this stuff and then learning from experience, it is a good way to learn. It's a painful way to learn, and it's slower. But now that it's almost like I got like the circuitry in my brain is like hot wired for that type of thing, and it's like I could run scenarios in my head before they even happen.
Hmm.
Like you and I could have a conversation, and you come up to me with a problem I'd never experienced,
Yeah.
and I could give you an answer, and it would be
Hmm.
like, oh, well, yeah, that would work. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Never had experience in that, but I relate other things to it because
Yeah.
really when it comes down to it, numbers are numbers. It doesn't matter what widgets attached to it. It's just if you know how to formulate those things.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
so
almost like there's this pattern of life that
Mhm.
everything exists within. And once you figure it out, every scenario is almost the same, whether it's just the cycles of chemicals like the nitrogen cycle, potassium cycle, all this stuff. The human body, it's very similar to all those different cycles that plays a part in it. A car, you mentioned a boat. I loved your analogy with the boat and the seas and navigating. It's just all these different things. You start seeing how they all play together eventually, and they're all one system, and they all work the same way. And everything can be an agent of entropy or an agent of surplus, whatever type of vehicle you want to put it in. And yeah, I noticed that once I got out of school too, and it helps me really think through scenarios that I haven't encountered before. But when I was in school, it was just like, tell me what I need to do. I'm freaking out, like
Yeah. We're looking for that one answer when really
yeah,
in life everything has multiple choice and multiple answers and multiple outcomes. I always look at it this way, to when, like, you're asking, how do I formulate that? I always look at life as it is cyclical. It's cyclical.
cyclical.
It's coming around. It's a circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not staying in one place. A lot of times how I feel is that it's moving forward. So it's like these loops, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might go around in that loop at like for 4 or 5 rotations before we learn the lesson. And then finally we kind of like, whoop, now we're at this next loop. It starts over here. It's cycling. We're still moving through time, but we don't get to like our next rotation until we learn this part. And then we're looping here. And maybe it only takes one time and we're like, whoop, okay. It just seems like that to me,
Do you think that all good things take time? I did a podcast on rich versus wealthy, and we were kind of exploring the idea of like literally every good thing takes time, and that rich, because we think of rich in terms of just finances, but it comes at the sacrifice of a lot of different things if you just get wealthy all of a sudden or rich all of a sudden. So it was really based around everything good takes time. I don't know if you agree with that, but that was kind of the conclusion that we came to. I don't know if that's kind of what you're saying with the circle analogy.
it could be, I know that we, like my circle analogy there is really like if we're failing in something, we might be stuck in that loop for quite a while until we could move forward. The world's moving forward anyway, but when
Right.
we finally move forward as people, doesn't matter. Good things do take time, but not always. Sometimes we get that jammed in our brain that it's going to take me forever to get to this point. When actually, if you have a good foundation, now it's going to take time to build that foundation.
That's what I was getting at. Every good thing needs a foundational element to it, which does take time. So,
Right. That
yeah,
foundation takes time, but once you build a good foundation, you could skyrocket.
right.
You know, just for example, I've dealt with I'll tell you, it's probably been probably more than 50% of the people. I don't have exact numbers on it, but the ones that skyrocket real quick, they're the ones that end up crumbling and failing.
Mm-hmm.
They may not crash all the way down to the ground. Okay. Don't put that in your mind,
Yeah, think downsizing.
but they have to downsize.
Yeah.
One particular friend of mine many years ago, he was a big YouTuber at the time. He was like an OG. He basically got to a certain point and then things started to crumble for him and he had to back down. And then it was like, that wasn't what he was meant to do. He was meant to do something else.
Yeah.
Now he discovered that and he is doing what he loves to do now. And it's kind of funny. It's like you would think that, with that more and better mentality of like, I want my business to be better. I want more and more and more. What is going on? you you would think with that mentality of wanting more and being better that his position was ideal, when all in actuality it was not. It was not for him, and he ended up discovering what he wanted. But that was his particular case. I think when we have that, if we don't build that foundation, you can have to downsize. If you do
Yes.
have a solid foundation, you know what you want. You have clear ideas of like, okay, this is where we want to go. This is what I want to do. This is what I want my business to look like. This is what I want my personal life to look like. You can be slow to start out, but once you start escalating and you got sound footing, it could be fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I totally agree.
there's a lot of guys out there that will, sometimes you just have to put your foot down on the gas. It's like, think of it this way. You build, let's just say I'm a car guy. I like machines. I like equipment. I understand them. Say you build like a buggy that's made for building, or for climbing hills, right? You went ahead, you built the structure, you got everything. Well, you can't really just like all right, I'm going to climb this hill and I got to get up there real fast. Otherwise I'm going to slide back down. There's some of those like super steep hills. I'm not
Uh-huh.
talking about rock crawling. I'm talking about like flat out. You got to put the pedal to the metal. Otherwise you're never going to
Yeah.
get to where you need to go. You're never going to
Yeah.
get to that ledge. That, you built the buggy, you spec'd everything out. You've got like all the right differentials in there. Maybe you don't have 4-wheel drive. Maybe it's just 2-wheel drive. Maybe you got all-wheel drive. You fixed it to where you think, all right, this is going to get me from here to here. You can't just crawl up the hill. You got to like lay into it
Yeah.
and just rip and tear. And sometimes you're almost going to stop and you're going to slide sideways. And it's like, oh, can I grab another gear, or what can I do? And then it's like, oh, no, just hold out. You're going to be in a weird spot for just a second, but then don't let your foot off the gas, because if you do, you're going to roll back. And if you, try braking, you're going to be stuck up there. It's like, no, just keep the foot on the gas, and you'll find the traction. Maybe something might happen. One little pebble might slide under those wheels to give it enough traction to start like you going again.
Uh-huh.
So, there's that whole track of thinking in a sense, but
There's Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say there's this so I've done a lot of investing in stocks and things like that. One of the cool things I like about stocks is I'm very much like a value investor, but I know a lot about technical trading and like the patterns and everything. And one of the laws or rules basically in trading is that you look for stocks with long, what are called consolidation phases. So they'll stay there for a very long time, and that's what allows them to explode, in that stair step thing that everybody's so familiar with. And so a rule of trading is, a lot of times, if you're looking at like a long-term chart, the longer the consolidation phase, the bigger the blast off. And so like that's what I try and get people to see in business too. It's like you're building that foundation so that the longer you build the foundation and save up more resources and gain more experience, you can blast off what you're talking about. It's a lot of it is due to you know just you might feel like you're not making any progress, but you're gaining a lot of experience and you're learning how to use your money a lot wiser, and you're rounding out who you are as a person, which helps you align with a goal. And so I guess my next question would be, what do you think is the key to building a foundation that you talk about? Because I'm big on that. I know a lot of other guys in the industry are. I think Naylor's big on that. What do you think the key is to building a solid foundation in our industry specifically?
So for the green industry, I mean, you really, again, it sounds cliche, but you have to understand your numbers. You have to know that. It's one of those things where everybody, like especially with maintenance, where you have, let's say, just like lawn mowing, it is a super low barrier of entry.
Yep.
Big companies can compete with, their competition could be the kid down the street. Just, hey, or, more than likely it's not the kid down the street anymore. Unfortunately, I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but you have a lot of younger people that just have no interest in doing this. They don't have they find ways of making money elsewhere without, putting their hands on a machine, a mower, standing out in the hot sun, right? You find more guys are a little bit older, but they might just either raid their garage and they're a business. It's like, hey, I've got a 21-inch mower, and I've got a belly mower. Those are like the little tractors with the, what grandpa uses. Or they might go to, one of the big box stores and buy like the really super residential zero turn mowers that are not designed for the heavy use that a professional uses. They don't. I'm not saying that the low barrier of entry prevents people from succeeding in this business. What I find is the people that come in that are the weekend warriors, or people that are just doing it to get by. Maybe they already have another job and then they're doing this on the side for additional income, and they have no real plans of staying in this industry. They're just, hey, this is something I could do. I'm going to charge $30 and they're not concerned about the industry. They're only worried about themselves. When you don't, when you have a huge influx of people that are just doing it for, for funsies, oh, I
Yeah.
just need a little extra money, and I could do this. You start the base of our customer base starts seeing that, oh, $25, $30, $35, that's still a thing. Okay, great. They don't understand the value that somebody that is doing this full time is doing. So as somebody that's going to have any chance of being in this industry for any particular time, you have to understand what it actually costs you to get the equipment, to get to market, so that you're not marketing to me is more important than actually buying the stuff.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
I'll tell you, you could, you could go and buy like a really nice, like for us, when we used to do the mowing, we don't do that service anymore. But when we would do, I go and buy a 52-inch, stand-on mower, right? My phone didn't ring anymore because I bought that. Nobody knew about it. Nobody cared. Nobody, it's like, oh, wow, he's got a mower. Okay, cool. What do we do now? It's just not going to get you customers. You got to market, you
Yeah.
got to understand what it actually costs to get your clients, client acquisition fees.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but the thing is, it's like you have to, if you're going to be a real business owner, you have to understand, what does it cost to keep the lights on? Oh, don't worry about that. I work out of my own garage. It's like, well, yeah, but still, like, what does it cost to operate out of your garage? There's a lot of solo guys that are just, well, I'm never going to be big enough to leave. I'm like this. I'm comfortable with it. I'll just work out of my own garage. It's like, understood. But hey, you know what? What if, you do need helpers? You need employees. Are they going to park in your driveway? Are they going to park on your street? Is it just going to keep growing and growing? It's like, what if you plan a little bit ahead of where you're at? What would it cost you to rent your garage from yourself? How many square foot is that? What is that square foot? Is like 300 square foot, 400 square foot, 500 square foot? How much would that space demand in your area if you were going to rent it? Maybe you should put that into your overhead.
Future pricing. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, I could go into insane amount of detail about all the nuts and bolts that it takes for you to keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
But, until you have a firm grasp of like what it actually costs you, and you know what your break even is, as far as like just conducting business, you're going to put yourself in a disadvantage. And this is why, my Budgets, Break Evens, and Bottom Lines workshop, that is really designed to one, really, a lot of times it is shocking to guys, like what it costs them, and they don't realize it. They're just like, well, my payment for my truck is this, and my mower payment's this, and I kind of pay myself sometimes. And it's like, no, we have to be more realistic about it, because the numbers aren't going to lie. You can't just you can't convince a number 7 that it's a number, it's a 10. You can't coax it out of it and be like, if you just turned a little bit this way, you might look like a 10. And I mean, we're not talking about like Friday night at the end of the night, your buddies are goading you on after you had a few drinks, and you're like,
Yeah.
hey, that lady over by the bar, and that she's pretty hot, right? No. We look at this with clear minds, clear thoughts, right? When I expose those numbers to them, a lot of times they're really shocked, and they're like, well, I can't do that. It's like, yeah, you can. You have to make sure that your pricing for your services is profitable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't work at break-even points. You can't work under break-even points, because guess what? You're going out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, when you understand not only what your expenses are, but then you start tying that into your dreams and goals. It's like, okay, well, now I know how much it costs me to run my business. What do I need to achieve And it's not like the ultimate goals of forever. It's like, what's my next goal? Well, hey, you know what? I would really like to first take care of my personal life and be able to make enough money to where I don't need another job, or I don't have to, work as hard. Maybe I'm going to hire employees to take some of the hats off of my head as a business owner. I want to focus on just selling work, or maybe I still want to be in the field, but I don't want to do the accounting, or I don't want to do anything. It's like these tiny little things. Like, you know what? I'm going to hire an accountant. I'm going to hire a CPA to help with this stuff. What's that going to cost? What do I need to do when it comes to that? Excuse me, I got my pups are getting anxious here. But the train's falling off the rails here, but hang on a second. I'll get back there. When you could see like those little milestone goals, and they might not be little, they might be pretty big. But if you once you combine what as far as your finances, and then you're incorporating that with what your goals are, it's like, oh, it's easy now. I know the steps I need to take to hit that milestone. What's the milestone after that? Let's not worry about that just yet. I'm always trying to play 2 or 3 steps ahead, but I don't get distracted by the 4th step ahead. I'm like, oh, my focus is on this place. Because, again, to go back to the analogy that I was using about the captain on the ship and everything, you're the captain on a ship, pretend you're on the high seas. You might need to navigate. Maybe you're along the coastline and you could see a landmark. It's like, well, hey, you know what? I know right next to that tall tree that we could see from sea, there's a port there. We need to get to that port to restock, refuel, whatever it might be. And if you are looking at it, but you're off course, it's not like, oh, we're just going to keep sailing in the current direction. It's like all you got to do is a small course correction.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on that smaller goal or that landmark, and then you could just course correct a little bit. It's not like, oh, we got to completely shift where our heading was northeast, and we're going to have to go southwest now. It's like, why did you let yourself get that far off path?
Mm-hmm.
You're going 100% the wrong way.
Yeah. I love it. I love it, John. After doing this, I've been in this industry for 5 years now, and it took me a while to the first year I was more concerned about, just I guess making sure all the organization's good and everything, and just your typical bookkeeping, accounting stuff. But the more we really are an education-based company, because we meet personally with everybody, and it's the exact same thing you're talking about. There is a huge lack of goals in this industry, and it's the biggest problem. One of the biggest problems. I'd put in the top 3. That's the only way you can actually, because as a human, if the cool thing about humans is you back them up against a wall and you say the only way out of this is to get to this situation or to get to this destination. Your brain comes alive, and it's something that you don't get to do in school. Your brain will problem solve to get to that destination. Like that's what's cool about humans. That I think separates them from artificial intelligence or whatever, is like, this is the goal. How are you going to get there? There's a million different ways to do it, but you got to get there. People need to stop thinking that there's some direct line to everything. It's a big damper on progress. Now, when you're doing this is something that I run into all the time. And I think Greg Crabtree talks about this, but how do you price in, when you're doing your calculations, owner salary, or, that's something that, on the P&L, it's not on your books. You don't have, I mean, you can if you're an S corp, but for the most part, typical LLC, it's not going to be on there. And the work that you're doing, you're wearing 5 hats, and, it's hard to know how much it's actually going to cost to replace you. That you can do an easy calculation on the labor side, just clocking in like you would anybody else, but all the other different hats that you're wearing, answering phone calls, and, doing back office stuff, and estimating and everything. How do you price in for those guys that are kind of, let's say they're under 250,000 in revenue? Most of the time they're still wearing all the hats. What do you think the key is to factoring in the owner salary, which I think is something that you really need to get right early on if you're going to be able to to scale yourself out eventually. You need to have margin for that when you remove yourself from the situation. So how much do you work into that when you're doing your course?
That's one of the first things that I ask them is one of the is how much do how much do you pay yourself? What do you pay yourself? And most, you're going to get a 50, well, probably higher than that, probably maybe 70-30, where guys aren't paying themselves. They're like, well, I just take the profit. I just take it to owner's distribution afterwards. And it's like, but they don't call it the owner's distribution. They're like, well, I just take money out of the bank account as I need it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you are severely handicapping yourself. I don't care if you're solo. Even if you're solo, you should have a fixed amount for what, like, if you, let's just say, you're either mowing lawns or you're operating a skid steer for landscaping, or, you're on a fertilizer machine, right? It doesn't matter. You need to pay yourself a reasonable wage right off the get. Now, some guys are like, well, I can't really afford it. I'm like, if for some reason I came over there and I broke your legs, okay, and I'm going to get away with it, nobody's going to come after me and you can't sue me. I broke your legs. I just came over with a shovel and said, listen, man, you're going to learn today. And I just hack away at your legs until you break both your femurs, right? You
That's
cannot work
really quick.
Oh, it could get dark. I generally have the kids' gloves on, but there's times when I want to say that. I'm like, sometimes it doesn't get through their head, and I'm like, I come over there, I break both your femurs, and I'm going to get away with it because nobody's going to catch me. And you can't sue me. You can't sue my company or anything like that, right? Just imagine that. The only option was to hire somebody. What would you have to pay that guy to do the job that you're doing? Not everything, because I didn't take away your voice. You could still answer phone calls and in casts and everything, but you could still do a lot of the other back behind the scenes things. But if you had to hire somebody to do exactly that job, what would you pay them? And you need them to stick around for a while. What can you pay them? And then it starts to click. Again, I generally don't approach my clients like that, but at the same time, it's really, really not getting through to them.
Yeah.
So I put it in that perspective, like what would it cost to have somebody? They're like, well, I don't know, 20, 25 bucks an hour. Okay, well, then that is what your base pay has to be. And let's not even talk about, we're not even just talking about 20, 25 an hour. We are going to assume that you have them on payroll. So let's include all the labor burden as well. You get your FUTA and your SUTA, your FICA, everything. So what is
Overtime.
that, $25? What's that?
Overtime too.
Overtime, exactly. Yeah. What is it actually cost? And let's put a pin on the overtime thing, because I
was just joking around, but
I'm just saying, like, I want to come back to that real quick. Because the thing is, if you don't calculate for that type of thing, you can't build a true budget.
Right.
And in my opinion, budgets, they're the first B in my workshop. But not only that, it's those budgets are what's going to really be the roadmap for your success. It's that living, breathing document that lives in your business that's going to help you achieve the goals that you want. So the better and more accurate you could get that budget, it's going to make your life easier. Yeah, it takes a lot of time in the beginning to get it all sorted out. It might even take, there's going to be revisions. I tell anybody that is doing a budget, I'm like, in the first 3 months, prepare to make, you might think you got it all done in 1 month, and it's going to change. It's a living, breathing document. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go, well, this is fact. It's like, well, circumstances might change. We might need to tweak it a little bit here and there. And usually within the first 90 days, or first 120 days, really, you're probably going to go through very, slight adjustments of everything till you kind of find that one that is really, really fits your business.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to that, what an owner should be paying themselves, you have to, of course you're not paying for all the hats, but you need to at least get one solid one And probably, I would say, like, whatever you're paying, what you're willing to pay, I would probably say tack on another 15% or so,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to, you're covering a lot of things. You need to understand that what you do is the most valuable thing in your business. It really isn't mowing lawns. It's not fertilizing. It's not, installing plants or doing hardscaping. That part is, that's a technician's job. You as a business owner, your job is to keep that all in order. For one, keeping more leads and more work coming into your business, and, just providing for, once you start having employees too, it's like you're not only affecting that individual employee, but you're affecting their lives and their families as well.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're taking more on your shoulders.
More
You get
responsibility.
more
Yep.
responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So, just to quickly loop back to the overtime thing, right? I want to make this known. This is how I feel about it. And I know from experience, especially in the construction industry, I've had, man, I can't tell you how many guys I've had come through that are always talking about, like, whoa, yeah, we work, 60, 70 hours a week, every day, every week. It's like, well, you could get a car and, you could redline the tachometer and it's really cool for a while, but after a while, you're going to blow that engine up.
Yeah.
And I relate that to how if we push our people every now and again, hey, you're on a straightaway and things are going and you just need to get to the next turn. Sometimes you could redline it, but it can't live there for a long time. Otherwise the engine's going to tear itself apart.
Right. That's
And
good.
it's the same thing with your
Mm-hmm.
employees. They can only do that for a short amount of time. And especially in today's age where, well, this doesn't matter what age we're in. This is pretty much universal. If you push people so much, they're going to leave you. They're going to either break down, quit, or, you're going to have a really disgruntled employee on your hands who's going to be a nightmare to deal with. And is going to, he could be the poison apple in the bunch
Mm-hmm.
that could actually start affecting others. And then, next thing you know, you don't have a crew.
Right. Right.
So again, just remember that it's like occasionally overtime is all right. But, even from my experience with construction, a lot of times the jobs that I had worked were turnaround jobs, and it might only be like a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month type of job. You weren't working 9 to 5, you were working 7/12s, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 2
Mm-hmm.
shifts, 1 daytime, 1 midnights, right? It's hard on people.
Yeah.
You could really only do that for a short amount of time because, like, towards the end of those jobs, especially like those 3-month hits, there was a ton of guys that were just burnt out beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
And they were either waiting, it's like, oh, I love the money. It's like, yeah, all your money's going away to taxes on Sunday. You're working for Sunday for free.
Right.
Even though it's like double time. It's like we would get paid anything over 8 was overtime. Saturday all day was overtime. And then Sunday, the whole day was double time.
What are your thoughts on profit first? Because I know you've talked about it on your show before.
Sure.
Do you find it effective in the industry, or do you find it too much for guys to do? Like, how do you recommend it for green industry, or?
It depends on what level they're at, because, even though it's a fantastic concept, like it's a powerful tool, especially when, you're separating your expenses into multiple different accounts. It really does give you a snapshot of like the health of your business right off the get. And for those that may not understand what the profit first philosophy is, well, obviously you're setting aside profit first. But I do like the organization of it because it reminds me of the Dave Ramsey envelope system.
Mm-hmm.
The envelope system was basically stuffing cash in envelopes that would help your personal spending to, you're limiting it to whatever is in that envelope. So like, for example, like groceries, you budget X amount of dollars out of your income and say, okay, this is going to be specifically for groceries, nothing else. You know, we're not going to go buy a handbag. We're not going to go buy something, a new pair of shoes out of that money. It's only, you know, grocery money. Now, as business owners, that's pretty impractical because, you know, we have things coming in and out. And that's where I think the profit first system works nicely because it encourages you to have multiple bank accounts. And like, I know, you know, for the one business, I have like 12 accounts. And guys are like, oh, isn't that expensive? It's like, no, actually, because I found a bank, luckily it's a local one, that allows us to, we don't pay for our bank accounts. We have checking accounts that are free. And even though they do charge a like $3, $4, I forgot how much it was. Maybe it's $10. I don't know. Like maintenance fee, if you sign up so that you don't get paper statements and you just keep it all online, it will, they waive that fee.
Mm.
Now, you know, I know that the bigger thing is, you know, paying yourself first and, or excuse me, it's not paying yourself first. It's profiting. You know, you're calling your shot. You're like Babe Ruth, okay, with this system. You're sitting there going, all right, I'm Babe Ruth. I'm pointing to the stands. I'm knocking this ball out into the stands. Well, think of it the same way. It's like, I'm going to make X amount of profit, you know, and, you know, per cycle. Let's just say, like with us, we get, another thing that helps us out is like our cash flow. It's like we have cards on file and we charge them out every single day. And it's not like, you know, people are like, you can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can. I've done it for years. 2017, I know exactly when we did that because originally when I started the company, I said, I'm not chasing money anymore because this is one of the goals I had.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not chasing money anymore. I've done it before. It sucks. I don't like it. Everybody's going to prepay. So you're going to be at one cycle ahead. You'll prepay once a month. We started running into issues with that. It was a lot of juggling around like, oh, we didn't show up because of rain or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? The most fair way of doing this is going to be, we're going to do the work, charge their card on file, get paid that day. So our cash flow is awesome.
Yeah.
It's been working ever since. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
But, you know, going back to profit first, when you have that many transactions coming in, you got money coming in, you got money coming out, and our cash flow is like a river. It is ever flowing. There's new stuff coming in, stuff going out all the time. And it's healthy. But utilizing that multiple account system is great because you could just say, all right, everything comes into our income account. And then, you know, once a week, I go ahead and I filter it out and I say, okay, this is going to operating expenses. This is going to the state tax that we collected on behalf of the state. We'll put money towards all the other things, marketing and supplies. And, you know, I have, like I said, I've got a bunch of different accounts that are very specifically earmarked for certain things, you know, equipment replacement, payroll, everything. It's, you know, it's still generalized in a way because you could sit there and be like, well, equipment replacement. It's like, yeah, well, we're going to buy a new stand-on aerator or something. You know, whatever it might be. But, you know, those things are all categorized. The only thing that the reason that I say it depends on what level they're at to recommend the true nature of profit first is when you call your shots and, you know, let's just say you're starting out and you're not used to having money. You're still, you're floundering, right? And you're like, I don't know I don't even know how to get profit from my business. It starts to structure you. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Mike Michalowicz, who is the author of that book and many other really good books, the Pumpkin Plan and the Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, and there's a few others that he has.
Clockwork, I think.
Clockwork.
Surge.
Yeah. I'm just going through my Rolodex of all the books that I've read. But anyway, I think he even start out at 1%, you know. So let's just say you have $1,000. You take 1% of it.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of money, but at least it gets you in the habit of putting that off to the side and saying, okay, I'm not going to touch that for a whole quarter. I'm not going to touch it for 3 months, or, uh, that, once that quarter's done, then I could say, okay, I'm going to pull that and, do whatever I want with it. If I want to put it towards my own distributions as an owner, I could do that. If I want to reinvest it, or do a combination of both, once you start getting to a certain size of business, I'm not saying that it's, it's actually good for people that are spontaneous, because then it shrink. Mike, what does he call it? Like the platters, or the,
Yeah, yeah. You like give yourself a smaller plate. Is that what you're talking
yeah,
about?
the
Yeah.
plates.
Yeah.
So, you look at the plates, like everything, imagine everything that is in your business has a plate, like payroll,
Hmm.
you need to make sure, if you have the profit plate, you're shrinking all of those other ones before you really know. You're just like, all right, we got to get by on this, and payroll. Okay, well, what's our minimum payroll? Okay, we're gonna make sure we just have that in there. You know,
Right.
um, it's like, when you do it, approach it that way rather than traditional um, accounting. It's a good, easy way to like get started. But I think, like, once you get to a certain point, you still have to go back, kind of like the traditional cogs, your
Yeah.
expenses and cost of goods sold, and then whatever's kind of left over is your profit.
Hmm.
But the way that I alleviate that, and I kind of teach people how to do it, is we're going to call our shots no matter what. We're not just going to, it's not going to fluctuate. We're going to go ahead. You're going to know what your break even is, but then we're going to say, okay, well, how much do you need to hit your goals? What does that kind of look like over, a cross sample of, like, what percentage, what margin should you be operating at?
Hmm.
And, like, a lot of times they use a 30% margin. Some guys are like, that's crazy. You can't get that. I'm like, yeah, you can. It's still going to force you. It's like, you're going to have to force yourself to be efficient. You're not going to be bloated like the guy with all the stand-on units that are just sitting under Visqueen, and still in
Yeah.
their package.
Right.
You can't, you have to understand, like, you have to be a lean, mean fighting machine in order to say, okay, I'm going to command this type of price. You kind of make it as tactical as possible, your operating expenses, so then you could really call your shots. You're still doing the Babe Ruth, but you're pointing into the outfield saying, hey, I'm going to knock this out into the stands. I'm going to command a 30% margin on this. And some guys are like, man, I can't do that because my prices are this and that. And I'm like, look, it's doable. I, I can do it. People I teach can do it. You just have to believe in it.
Hmm.
And if you keep saying you can't do it, guess what? You're right. You can't do it. You know why? You psyched yourself out. You won't make the changes. I could do so many things for people, but I can't, I could try to inspire them and do things and show them. I could literally show them how this could work. But if they don't want to move forward, I can't force them to.
Right.
So it's like, if you still have that mentality of I can't, I can't, I can't, then you're right. You can't.
Hmm. Now, when you say 30% profit margin, are you putting a 30% on all the different so maintenance, landscaping, application, like you shoot for 30 across the board, or are you talking about 30% on more of your higher end, custom type of work, or your application side, those little higher profit margins there? Do you shoot for 30% in the maintenance as well, or?
This is why, like, like, I go through people's business, we just don't look at it as a whole. If you offer different services, I consider those divisions. So if you have
Yeah.
a mowing division, you have a fertilizer division, they're like, dude, I'm just one guy and I do these services. I'm like, yeah, but you have divisions, because you're not going to roll out with say you're mowing, you're not going to roll out with your fertilizer machine, your fertilizer setup. You're not going to be, bringing let's just say you're in the landscaping and you still offer mowing. You're not going to bring a skid steer with, a bucket and a grapple hook to a mowing job, right? So you got to, like, understand there's divisions. It's like divisions in all your stuff.
Hmm.
Some of them are definitely going to be way more expensive and, to operate. And, obviously you could still call your shot of what margin you want to operate at. But you don't, you're not, it's not a one size fits all thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you're not talking about 30% profit on the P&L at year end. You're talking about more, I
It
made
could,
30% on this job type of deal.
right. And it fluctuates
Okay.
too, because, here's the thing. It's like, 30% markup, or excuse me, margin. It's different than marking it up 30%. A lot of guys get confused. They're like, oh, okay, so whatever my thing is, if I want a 30% margin, I'll just add 30%. And I'm like, no, it's 42.86%. You have to, there's a whole, it sounds the same, but it's not, it's like, no. Markups and margins are different. They're different formulas. So like when I say that, I want people to understand it's like, just because you say 20%, it's, you have to mark it up 25%. There's different math there. And when
Yeah.
somebody
Based on windshield time and whatnot. Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of stuff in there,
Yeah.
That's one of the things we do too, is like we also calculate for, we build out like a catalog for their equipment. And that is not only equipment replacement, but that's also operating expenses based off of what their numbers are, because, it includes like insurance and fuel and oil and all the maintenance that we put into it. Hey, you never know when you're going to need a new belt or something. We incorporate that into that. It doesn't get like, I literally get to a point where it gets like molecular.
Okay.
Some
So,
people are like, you don't need to do that. And I go, I do it. You know why? Because that way I know, and I have no fear when I tell people my prices.
yeah. Now,
Um,
I don't know if we're going too much of a rabbit trail here. I just find it really interesting. How do you, with that philosophy in mind, how do you deal with your material cost, like
mhm.
markups and everything? I know a lot of guys will use like a standard, I do 25% markup. Now, do you nuance it more like you're talking about, or do you have like, how do you deal with it? I guess is my question.
So we separate, like, I do fertilization weed control in my lawn care business. I know exactly what it costs to just show up with the equipment. Okay. So that, we boil that down, and I literally call that like a stop fee. And I could do that across any kind of division. Doesn't matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have, materials attached, so fertilizer or hardscaping or even landscaping, you've got plant life and things. Hardscaping, you have your rocks, you have your materials for underlying, for your underlayment, and then you have like your bricks and pavers and all that other stuff, right? Well, when it comes to that, then that's on a slightly different thing. Like traditionally, like with the chemicals, I might, have a 50% margin on it. It means you mark it up 100%. Why? Or like, oh, dude, that's not unethical. I'm like, no, it is, because think about it. In my line of field, if somebody calls back and they need a touch up, we try to avoid callbacks at all costs, and that's why we use higher end, chemicals and things, and we have really trained people to do it. But if you do have to go back, you really not charging for that. You messed up the job, so you're going to make it right. It costs extra. You're not only using extra material, but you're not getting paid for the service call.
Right.
Okay. But it depends on what it is, and it depends on when what your market will support.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I could calculate things, and I could be like, oh, it's, just for example, right? Let's just say I know the going rate for things is $100. Okay, that's kind of like the average, maybe. It might cost me, say, 25, and then after I add my percentage, I'm still under that 100. I'm not going to charge less just because of the fact that I could do it cheaper. I'm going to look at it and say, you know what? It doesn't matter. People that don't know their numbers, people that do know their numbers, they're still charging this $100. well, guess what? I'm going to charge right around that neighborhood, and then that's when it starts to fluctuate a little bit. If you know
Mm-hmm.
what your base prices are, you're like, this is amazing. Everybody's buying it for this much. I could come in and underbid everybody, but then why? It's like, yeah, I could get more volume, but then, depending on what my goals are, it's like, then I got to add a new truck. I got to add new machines. I got to get a new technician. I have to do all these things. Well, why not just reach my capacity with what the norm is?
Right.
As long as that norm is not like I'm losing money or I'm not hitting that percentage, it's like, hey, you know what? Everybody's charging 100, and maybe my, if it costs me say $80, and everybody's like, well, I'm charging 100. I'm like, well, that's not going to work for me. My base price is going to be like 125,
Mm-hmm.
so that I make the margin that I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that it's funny. It's like everybody thinks it's not that it's everybody's unique. There are certain things that I find across the board. It's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the people should be charging this much. Even if they're not at that level yet, they should be charging this
Sure.
much just because of the demand, and that this is what people are programmed to pay for it.
Right. And those are usually the people that are easier to deal with as well. So, as
Exactly.
you know, um, so I hear a lot of conversation about this. And I'm sure there's a lot of nuance to this. How do you feel about the subcontractor model versus the W-2 model?
Oh, 1099.
Yeah.
I'm gonna embed myself in the sand. I'm not drawing a line. I'm gonna dig myself up to my knees and stand here. I will tell you, if you're an employer and you have, let's just say, contractors working for you, but you tell them what time of the day to show up, they're using your equipment, you have control over them. They are not 1099 contractors.
Right. Right.
So if you're going about it that way, I highly suggest you change, because it's going to lead. Listen, I'm not a big fan of the IRS at all, but they could like screw your life up pretty bad. And
Yeah.
for some reason, they have more power than they should.
Yeah. I think my question is more grounded in let's say you're doing both ways right.
Okay.
What's the best way that you found through your experience dealing with people? What do you think is the most effective route, or is there an answer to that? Is it very much dependent upon your goals and, like we talked about earlier?
Yeah. Now, I've used subcontractors in the past. They did work that was outside my main scope of work. So, we used to take care of HOAs, and I had, they wanted, they were having water issues where water was building up. And basically I was like, you need French drains, and you need, another way, because they're mulch beds. They'd never had them edged out. I'm like, every time it rained, all the mulch would end up in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I ended up hiring, or, getting a subcontractor. I got a bid from them on what they would do to put dig a trench edging. And that way there was a distinct line between the lawn and the mulch beds. And the thing is, it's like that type of work, I don't have the manpower for it. I don't have the equipment, the right equipment, even though, it's like people go, oh, get out there, with a spade shovel and just dig the thing. And, well, what do you do with all that other stuff? I don't have a dump trailer, because that's not my business model. I don't need a dump trailer. I don't need all this extra equipment. Yes, I could go rent it out. But at the end of the day, there's missed opportunity costs, because I'm dedicated to doing something that I'm not set up for. So why not just hire it out, and then they do a fantastic job, and I could go on with my business
Right.
as normal. Like, I'm not throwing a wrench in my schedule. And as we know, because we're working outside, it is, Mother Nature is always there waiting
Yeah.
for us to like get a little bit behind. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'll make it up on Tuesday. And then it's all of a sudden, rain. Gotcha. Now you're 4 days behind. Uh, so
That's
when it
good.
comes down to it, you know, which is more effective, W-2 or 1099 as a subcontractor? Again, if it's outside of your scope of work, I would contract it. I would subcontract it. If it's well within your, you know, when you have your W-2 employees doing stuff that is inside your scope of work, it's going to be much more beneficial. You're going to be more profitable because you have control over the situation.
Okay. That's good. I like it. How much do you think that simplicity plays a role in business success? So, you've seen a lot of budgets, things of that nature. How often do you see the pattern of the guys that are really killing it with a simple model business? So, I don't know if that's a clear enough question, but do you
No,
see what
that's
I'm
clear.
kind of getting at? Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear. You know, KISS, keep it simple,
Right.
or keep
Right.
it
Keep it
super
simple.
simple, or keep it
Or
simple,
the other one.
stupid.
Yeah.
Either way, some people, I'm a little bit older and we have a bad sense of humor, so we use the latter. Um, but the thing is, even if you look at the most complicated business, or the not, I shouldn't say complicated business, you look at businesses that are doing big money. Okay, a perfect example of this. I'm good friends with Jonathan Potoshnik, the
Yeah.
lawn care millionaire. Okay,
He's my favorite.
yeah, he still he stepped away. Sold his other business for
Mhm.
Service Autopilot. He is still has his original lawn care business that for the first just until recently, like he hadn't been in the building for like 10 years or something. It was ridiculous,
In City Turf, is that what you're
Yes,
talking
for
about?
City
Yeah.
Turf.
That's wild.
So like he's getting back into it. He wants more hands, he's getting back in and redirecting some things to make it even better. Um, but essentially they try to keep it as simple as possible. And one of the biggest things that I learned from him was just do one service and
Mhm.
get amazing at it. Because a lot of us, we look at, it's very easy. I remember even for myself when I was restarting again, I was like, I'm going to do mowing, I'm going to do hardscape, landscape. I gave myself like everything. And I wasn't ready for it, one. And two, I was just fooling myself. I'm like, it's nice to have a one size fits all company. Like everybody calls you and then you just can take care of everything for them. There is a benefit to that. But, you know, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you've been in business for a long time. If you're too spread out, let me put it this way. If, Joey, if you were in the field, okay, so let's just say you had a company, right? And it requires you to go be on the mower and be on a skid steer and be on a dragging hose for fertilizer, but it's always you. That's way too much.
Right.
I would suggest, again, like with Jonathan, how he structured a lot of his business was to be very good at one thing.
Mhm.
Once you're amazing at it, you got all the kinks worked out, everything is good, then consider adding in like one more service.
Right.
And then just follow the same thing. It's like, you got this one, it's bulletproof. Boom, done,
Yeah.
off to the
Mhm.
side. Let's work on this one. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Okay, well, get rid of that. Take it off your roster. Take it out of your scope of work. Find this one. Okay, we're going to do pressure washing. Okay, maybe that works. But whatever you do, make it bulletproof.
Mhm. Can't agree more.
I could upset a lot of people by saying which services I would work with. And they're like, well, I'm like, yeah, listen, I just, from experience and from just a money standpoint, I want to focus on higher margin businesses. And, one key thing that I want to kind of throw out there, once you figure out what your margins are, take a good hard look at it. If you're, well, imagine you're a jet pilot, right? Like a fighter jet pilot. Like once you start hitting like a 15% margin, I'm not saying like that's bad, but you're going to have maybe a warning will come up saying like, hey, we got to get to a higher altitude. You
Hmm.
know, it's not like you're crashing, but at the same time, it's like we need, like an alert's going to go off because that's what they call, the floor. It's
Yeah.
like you can't operate below that floor. It's like, hey, raise altitude, raise altitude. Okay, you're going to be hearing that, right?
Hmm.
For me, like if you start looking at things and you start seeing like 12%, that sounds like a missile lock on me. It's like, oh, we got to do something. We got to maneuver, because that for me is like the danger zone. It's like,
Hmm.
we got to get higher, right?
Right.
If you're operating at 10% or lower in margin, you are probably shot up, like somebody shot you. You're going down, but you're kind of going down kind of slow, but you're not going to be able to recover.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say not be able to recover, but it's going to be
Well, you
very
can still
hard.
pull the parachute and liquidate everything,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. And I did that, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like, yeah, that analogy is kind of new. I popped that one up a little while ago, but
I love it.
the, I've always said though, like if you're under 10% or below, you are going out of business slowly and you just don't know it. It's
Hmm.
painful.
Now, how much do you think? So typically, the lower margin businesses are typically easier to scale, or would you agree with that? So, like for a maintenance,
Mhm.
and they're more. I would say that this is kind of a question. Do you think they're tied more to stability in the economy too? Like, for example, the maintenance, the grass always grows, even when the economy goes down. The grass is still going to grow, whereas like when consumer spending goes down, so we've been in a good economy for the last 15 years for the most part. The economy goes down, the higher margin businesses like hardscaping and things like that, there's less demand for them. And so how much do you think that plays into guys deciding which model to go with? The scalability and the bulletproof, in tandem with the economy. How much would you put into your thought process if you were picking something to just run with it and keep it simple?
Now you got to remember, no matter what business whatever we're offering, even if you think, you don't really think like mowing is a very uh, luxurious service. It is a luxury. It's a luxury service.
Yeah.
It's not a commodity. We got to get our minds out of that. Even though people will pay for it during tough times, it's still not a commodity,
Sure.
because it's, you could still live your life with, a tall lawn, weedy lawn, whatever. It's just not
Right.
as
If things get
good.
really bad, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Things get really bad, nobody's going to be doing it. But
Sure.
the thing is, yeah, you strike up a good point. Like hardscaping, landscape installs, um, irrigation installs, things like that. One, they're niche, and then second, they are also, um, when things start to tank, then people will put those projects off.
Hmm.
So a lot of project work really is connected to the way the economy is. But I will have one caveat there. There are people that are out there in across the country. It doesn't mean it's just in one place or one other. They don't care about the economy. They want a new pool, they're going to get a new pool. They want a new hardscape design, they want a new patio, they want an outdoor kitchen, whatever. It doesn't affect them. They're just looking at it and they're like, there's a lot more people that are that well off
Hmm.
that we don't realize. You just have to know your demographic. That's another thing. It's like
Yeah.
I talk to people, I'm like, listen, wherever you live, just because you live there doesn't mean you have to service that area.
Hmm.
You can, you don't have to sleep where you work. You could, I used to have a satellite uh, just to take care of like our HOAs. And what I mean by that is, instead of everybody coming to home base where I was located at, I literally rented out storage units that were across the street from that HOA,
Hmm.
and they all worked from there,
Mm.
because the distance between home base and there was just it was just killing too much time.
That's
So I'd
good.
have everybody meet there,
Yeah.
and then they worked from there. It was just so much better. So anyway, the reason I bring that up is, you got to find those pockets of
Right.
people that will do this stuff. But to get to the bigger question that you're asking, again, don't think that just because, you're working in say a lower margin service, it's still a luxury service. So make sure you're charging the right amount
Hmm.
for it. Um, yeah, more people are likely to keep the lawn guy that mows the lawn every week than, say, for my service, where I'm only there maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. They're more likely to keep the mow guy,
Right.
because they're like, well, the lawn could be not green and the lawn could have weeds in it, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I just need it to blend in with the neighbor's lawn. So they, maybe if you do live in an HOA, they're not
Yeah.
harping on you, but
Yeah. I love what you were saying about the pockets. And I think to add to that, I don't think a lot of people realize how much wealth has actually been made during recessions as well. Like, for example, if you are the guy that knows where the pockets are and everybody else is struggling and you have a solid balance sheet, and you've built your foundation up, a lot of times guys will acquire a lot of those other companies and brands during that time where cash is tough. And it actually makes a lot of companies stronger, the ones that have identified the pockets, that have their operational expenses maybe 2 to 3 months saved up. They have money to go out and purchase some of these other equipment or whatever on sale, because those guys are just trying to keep their business afloat. And so it presents opportunities as well. So I love what you said about the pockets, and just something to think about.
during, I'll just say within the past 4 years, it's 2024 right now, just for reference, but in the past 4 years, we basically had a couple black swan events, and those are the events
Sure.
that nobody could really predict.
Right.
They just kind of happen. During this time, including myself, like I've had some struggles, but at the same time, because we run our business debt free and I have money to invest in certain things like equipment and whatnot, I was able to capitalize on some other people's
Mm-hmm.
misfortune, people
Mm-hmm.
that were over leveraged.
Yep.
They were like, I got to get rid of this machine and whatever. It's like, well, actually, that might be something we're interested in it. So we're not being predatory at any means, but putting yourself in that position, you can definitely, make waves to, make moves so that you can actually profit from it, and in not an unethical way either. It's like they need this capital, they need to liquidate this capital, this asset that they have, because, they're struggling. They weren't seeing
Yeah.
things. So, hey, I could step in. They get helped out because I give them liquid cash.
Yep.
They give me the machine, and I go and I use that because um, Joey, it's so true. Like during the past 4 years, especially, there have been a crazy amount of people that have made tons of money during it. And not only, it's not just like, oh, we're going to take our tin hats off. I'm talking about like lawn care guys,
Yeah.
landscapers and hardscapers. I have several friends in the industry, like Caleb and Brittany Almond. They have Almond
Mhm.
Landscape. Not saying that they truly benefited, but they noticed a real good uptick in the amount of projects that they had. And one of the reasons was it was an unexpected reason. It's not like, oh, because everybody was getting $2,000 paycheck. I was not getting that. I never got that money. But, people were spending more time at home. And what they're doing, even if they're working from home from their computers and stuff, they were like looking outside, and it's like, I can't go anywhere. Well, why don't, instead of going to the park or whatever, and they locked us down and we can't go there without getting harassed by the cops. Well, let's just, make our backyard an oasis. So, it's funny. You would think that that type of service would drop during that time period when actually there was quite a bit of an uptick.
Yeah.
People were putting more money into their homes during that time, even though there's hey, I can't show a chart, but you see my hands, there's some
Yeah.
kind of weird,
Yeah.
influx thing going on there. It's like the money went down, but at the same time, the spending went up.
There
And
was a lot of stimulus at the time too that made it
yeah,
a non-traditional recession, but yeah, it's totally true. It's the guys that have the cash that can prop up the economy during tough times. So I totally agree that it's not predatory. It's actually a really good thing that
mhm.
needs to happen. Um, well, John, this has been a absolutely fascinating conversation. You got an amazing brain. I love trying to tap into it a little bit. And thanks for giving me the honor of interviewing you.
Oh, honor's mine, man. Uh, so I mean, yeah, if you, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. I'm hoping that everything goes great for you. Of course, if you want to hear more from me, you could always just click over to Profits with Pajak, and available on all the podcast libraries there.
Yeah, that was my next thing, is tell everybody where they can get a hold of you.
Oh,
You got
gotcha.
the Profits with Pajak, and yeah, you're on Instagram, correct, and Facebook and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let the audience know where they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, the best way to really get a hold of me is generally through the podcast itself. profitswithpajak@gmail.com is the call in / we'll put your questions up on the air type thing. Sometimes we'll reach out to so our listeners and actually have them on the show. But johnpajak.com is also where you could see some of my the coaching workshops and things. I'm working on something really new. It's going to be coming out this right before Equip here. We're going to be at the LCR Summit, and we're going to kind of release some amazing new things.
Oh man, now I want to go. I was just talking to Naylor, and I'm going out of town from the 3rd to the 9th in Kansas, and I really, really want to go up there to LCR because I haven't been able to make it in the past. Or I haven't known you guys that long. I've known Paul for a while, but
Sure.
Anyway, I'm coming home from Kansas, and then I have to immediately fly back up to Kentucky. And Megan's 8 months pregnant, and I got a 2-year-old, and I really want to go, but I'm still kind of up in the air on it. But
no, I get it.
I really want to meet Patochnik, and now you're teasing me with this new release that you got going on, so now it's even more tempting.
Yeah, Patochnik's not going to be. He's this is his only speaking engagement for the entire rest of the year. He's going to take a couple years off, and he's focusing on some other things. So I think there's a replay that you could buy at lcrsummit.com. Tickets, I think, are almost gone. If they aren't,
they were up the other day when I checked, but I know the VIP dinners sold out and everything.
Oh yeah, the VIP stuff is pretty much.
But I was still up in the air, but I don't know if I can do that to my family. We were talking about family. I don't know if I can. A lot of our busy times during the month is right during that time too, because we do personal meetings. So we got that, and Megan's 8 months pregnant. Anyway,
yeah,
it'd be a stress to my family to get up there, but I really would love to go.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience. Not just going to Louisville is fun. But LCR Summit's going to be Monday and Tuesday. That's the 14th and 15th, and then that leads right into the Equip Expo. That's the the rest of the week, basically 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, whatever, or 16th through the 18th. It's a full week. I'm coming in on Sunday. That's how big it is. It's like, I even told my wife, I say I might just stay an extra night just so I could get enough sleep to drive home for the event. So I probably won't even come home until like Saturday.
Now, where are you located? This is a side note, but you're pretty close by, aren't you?
I'm in Northwest Indiana. I'm up by Chicago. I'm up by Gary, Indiana.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm literally like, I could hike over to Gary. But that's where I'm geographically located.
Okay.
But for those that are listening, if you don't mind me, I'm going to try to save you as much money as possible. I have a whole bunch of discount codes and stuff, but if you still want to get to Equip, there's still opportunity there, and you could save 50% off with promo code Pajak, and that's Pajak. So my last name.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I want to give John a shout out too. I have a lot of clients that do his program, and they really speak highly of it. And anyway, John, I was just really impressed with John when I met him in person. So anybody that wants to check out his program and that needs their pricing really dived into, if he didn't impress you with this podcast, then I don't know what will. So definitely do his program, check out his stuff. It's really valuable information. I think everybody needs to hear it. So with that being said, we'll see you guys next time.